Mr. President, Secretary Baker, Director Miller, members of Congress, honored guests, on Tuesday and Thursday of this week, the United States Congress will bring to a close the latest chapter in American trade history. Their votes will cap close to 50 years of United States leadership in bringing down trade barriers, fostering economic growth, and strengthening democracy throughout the world. Their votes will allow for the realization of 8 years of work by Presidents Reagan, Bush, and Clinton, and the hundreds of members of Congress who have worked on a bipartisan basis, hand in glove, with these administrations all along the way. Throughout the 8 years, the Uruguay round negotiations have enjoyed broad support from conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats, business and consumers. Today's audience, which includes high-level officials from every administration since Harry Truman's administration, is testimony to the broad support that this agreement enjoys. I would also like to read this letter. Dear President Clinton, we write to add our voices of support to the Uruguay round agreement. This agreement is the product of 3 administrations, Democratic and Republican, and the latest in a series of freer trade initiatives that have been pursued by every president since the Second World War. Congressional passage of the Uruguay round agreement this year will confer significant economic benefits on the United States and the global economy. Equally important, it will demonstrate that the U.S. is committed to continue leading the world to address the challenges of a dynamic world economy. Sincerely, Gerald R. Ford, Jimmy Carter, George Bush. However, in spite of this very broad and deep and strong support, as we learned during the NAFTA debate, Americans who believe in freer trade must speak up. The fact that so many distinguished Americans are here today to give one last push to the GATT agreement demonstrates the confidence we all have in America's ability to compete and win. President Kennedy once noted at a White House dinner in a famous comment that his dinner guests represented the greatest collection of minds ever to dine at the White House since Thomas Jefferson dined alone. Well, we're not serving dinner, but we do have an awesome collection of great Americans here. And I'd first like to recognize members of the President's Cabinet and other senior officials, and if you would hold your applause until they all stand, Secretary Warren Christopher, Secretary Lloyd Benson, Secretary Ron Brown, Secretary Bob Reich, Secretary Federico Pena, CEA Chairman Laura Tyson, National Economic Council Chair Bob Rubin, NSC Advisor Tony Lake, Chief of Staff Leon Panetta, SBA Administrator Phil Lader, Export-Import Bank Chairman Ken Brody. We appreciate the teamwork and the help. I'll wait. Please. The President's Cabinet worked tirelessly last year to complete the negotiations and this year to implement the agreement. I skipped over one member of the President's team for special recognition, and I want him to appreciate the fact that several of his colleagues were waving for my attention and pointing in his direction there. But we all know that Mickey Cantor is an underachiever. In 23 months, all he has done is negotiated the NAFTA side agreements, pushed NAFTA through Congress, completed GATT negotiations, and negotiated an agreement with the Japanese. This year, Mickey, along with Secretaries Benson and Brown, Leon Panetta, and Bob Rubin, have guided the GATT legislation through Congress. Mickey, the President expects you to be back at work by 12:06 today, and I'd like to say a special word of thanks to you for all the incredible hard work that you've done, Mickey. Thank you very much. Stand up. I'd also like to recognize the many distinguished members of Congress who are present, but first I'd like to give special recognition to the two national leaders of our Congress who have served this country with grace, distinction, and total commitment. Our nation is going to miss them and their service very dearly. I'd like to recognize Speaker Tom Foley and Minority Leader Bob Michel. If you all would. We're also joined by Chairman Sam Gibbons, Bob Matsui, Bill Richardson, Barbara Kennelly, Dick Armey, Butler Derrick, David Dreyer, and Jim Colby. I apologize if I've missed some, but thank you all for being here. Also with us today are top officials from every administration since President Truman, as I mentioned, and several Nobel Prize winners in economics. I'd appreciate, again, if you would hold your applause while I mention all of these groups. May I ask to stand, please, former Secretaries of State Larry Eagleburger and James Baker, who will be speaking in just a moment, former National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft, former Treasury Secretaries Michael Blumenthal and Henry Fowler, former Commerce Secretaries Barbara Franklin, Frederick Dent, Elliot Richardson, Alexander Trowbridge, former Chairman of the Federal Reserve Paul Volcker, former Special Trade Representatives Carla Hills, Clayton Yiter, and Bob Strauss. And incidentally, Ambassador Hills negotiated the Uruguay round for 4 years with skill and determination, and I want to say a special word of thanks to you, Ambassador. Former CEA chairs Herbert Stein, Paul McCracken, and Raymond Saulnier. Former OMB directors Jim Miller, who will be speaking in a moment, and Bert Lance. Nobel Prize winners in economics, Professor Vasily Leontiev, Paul Samuelson, James Tobin, Lawrence Klein, and Bob Solow. We're also joined by former Deputy Trade Representatives Jules Katz, former White House Deputy Chief of Staff Bob Zellick, former Representatives Tom Downey and Vin Weber, and I'd like to ask you all to join me in an expression of thanks to these public servants. Thank you. And thank you again, Ambassador Hills. Last but not least, I'd like to recognize Jerry Junkins, CEO of Texas Instruments. Jerry has put together the impressive business coalition in support of the GATT. He has worked tirelessly and effectively. There's no telling how many hours Jerry has put into this. Jerry, if you'd stand, we'd like to thank you for your hard work on this. Trade policy has been and must continue to be bipartisan. Today, in addition to hearing from President Clinton, we will first hear from two leaders from the Reagan and Bush administrations who have served our nation with distinction. As OMB Director, Jim Miller made tough choices about the direction of our economy, about which programs to cut, and how the federal government can best allocate its resources. Since leaving that position, Jim has continued to make his mark in academia, in think tanks, and in public policy. Throughout this year, he has been an active supporter of the GATT agreement. And our second speaker right after Director Miller is Secretary Jim Baker. And what can you say about Jim Baker? Secretary Baker has performed at a high level in the highest levels of government, including serving as Treasury Secretary, Secretary of State, and White House Chief of Staff. Last year, he spoke eloquently in favor of NAFTA. This year, we welcome his support for GATT. Most importantly, both the President and I are delighted at how much Secretary Baker is enjoying life outside of government. First, we'll hear from Director Miller and then from Secretary Baker. Jim Miller.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, distinguished members of the Cabinet, former colleagues, and members of Congress, leaders of Congress, and other distinguished guests, it's great for me to be here. You know, if there's anything we Republicans and Democrats ought to be able to agree on, it's the desirability of Congress passing the enabling legislation for the Uruguay round to reduce tariffs and to eliminate barriers to trade. A lot's at stake for us. Greater exports for the U.S. economy. GDP should rise $150 billion. More jobs for American workers. 500,000 jobs at stake here. Lower prices for consumers. Billions of dollars per year. The net benefits of the Uruguay round are so large, Mr. President, that every single director of the Office of Management and Budget, former director that is, since BOB was converted to OMB in 1970, starting with George Shultz, has signed a letter endorsing this Uruguay round and asking Congress to approve the legislation. Now, these 11 budget directors came at things a little different ways. Sort of like getting 11 economists, Ms. Tyson, Dr. Tyson, in a room, you get 12 opinions, but they all think it's extremely important. Now, there are two arguments that are made against the Uruguay round. One argument is that it would be a budget buster. I stand second to no one in being concerned about busting the budget. But in my judgment, this would not be a budget buster. First, CBO and OMB agreed that offsets and pay-go reserves would be more than sufficient to make up the losses from reduced tariffs, and that would be money that people would keep in their pockets, by the way, during the first 5 years, even under a very conservative assumption. The second 5 years, in my judgment and the judgment of most of the budget directors, it would actually be a deficit reducer because the increased economic activity stimulated by the accord, the Uruguay round, would more than offset the reduction in tariff revenue. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Uruguay round is a win-win proposition and should not be characterized in any other way. Finally, there's an argument against this Uruguay round is that it would constitute a loss of sovereignty. Now, the legislation that has been proposed clearly says no provision of the Uruguay round agreements, nor the application of any such provision to any person or circumstance that is inconsistent with any law of the United States shall have any effect. That's very clear. Moreover, my friend and former colleague, Judge Robert Bork, has opined to Ambassador Canada that the sovereignty issue is merely a scarecrow. Under our constitutional system, no treaty or international agreement can bind the United States if it does not wish to be bound. So those, I think, are red herrings. The major arguments against the Uruguay round do not stand the test of scrutiny. And for that reason, Mr. President, on behalf of the 250,000 members and supporters of Citizens for a Sound Economy and on behalf of all 11 former OMB directors, I respectfully urge Congress to approve the legislation implementing the Uruguay round. Thank you.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, distinguished guests, leaders and members of the Congress, I'm delighted to be here this morning. Mr. Vice President, thank you for that generous introduction. It's always fun to come back here to the White House in November. Last year, ladies and gentlemen, I did join others here at the White House in support of NAFTA. And I did so because I think that NAFTA was good for working Americans. I did so because I believe that NAFTA was a test, really, of American leadership. And I did so because I believe that partisanship has really no part to play when the vital interests of this nation are at stake. And that's why I'm here again today, really, to join the many other Americans, Democrats and Republicans alike, who recognize just how very important this treaty is to the nation's future and who understand the potentially tragic consequences of delay. Today, I think that we Americans once again face a momentous choice. We really face a choice between escapism or engagement. In 1930, of course, we chose wrongly. Confronted by global depression, we attempted to escape the reality of economic interdependence by turning inward. A Republican Congress passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff. Trade collapsed. The Depression deepened. And millions of Americans paid a terrible price. Escapism, in short, had failed. After World War II, of course, we were wiser. This time we chose to embrace the reality of a global economy by looking outward. The United States took the lead in creating the Bretton Woods system of international economic cooperation. It was a decision that ushered in the longest period of economic growth in human history. It was a decision that helped make the United States the most prosperous nation in the world. Where escapism had failed, opportunity triumphantly succeeded. And now it seems to me this nation stands at a similar moment of decision and opportunity. By deciding for NAFTA, we began seizing that opportunity. And as you've just heard, the results are already apparent and they're extraordinary. NAFTA will create employment for as many as 100,000 Americans this year alone. During the debate over NAFTA, the misguided and the misinformed predicted a vast sucking sound as American jobs went south. Today, the only sound to be heard is the powerful wind of economic freedom, raising prosperity on both sides of the border. If anything, GATT will create even more American exports, and it will create even more American jobs. If anything, it is even more vital for America's national interest. I think Americans won an important battle with NAFTA, but let GATT fail, and we risk losing the war. With the administration's recent assurances on the World Trade Organization, there is no longer any excuse for obstruction. Congress should pass GATT, and it should pass GATT not next year, but now. Delay could prove fatal, and let's have a little bit of straight talk here. The American people want their political leaders to be honest with them. And we all know, everybody in this room knows, that a vote to delay is a vote to kill. As one who was closely involved with the GATT negotiations during both the Reagan and Bush administrations, I know GATT is an agreement that will create economic growth, that will cut taxes, that will not cede our sovereignty, and that deserves to be passed on its own merits. As a former Secretary of State, I know that the world will correctly read any rejection of GATT as an American retreat from international leadership. And as a former Secretary of the Treasury, I know that passing GATT will send markets here and around the world a clear signal of this country's readiness to compete in the global economy. And I also know, as Paul Volcker and I were discussing earlier before the ceremony started, that rejecting GATT would indeed be a calamity for already nervous financial markets. But my friends, it is speaking simply as an American that I would like to conclude. Since World War II, America has been a very blessed country. We have enjoyed, despite occasional and sometimes even very acrimonious differences, broad and deep bipartisan support for the idea of an America fully engaged on the world stage. That bipartisan tradition began with Democrats like President Truman and Republicans like Senator Vandenberg. It is a tradition that saw us through the dark years of East-West confrontation to final victory in the Cold War and made possible the system of open trade and investment that today provides jobs to literally millions of our citizens. It is a tradition that remains as precious today as it has always been. A tradition summed up by Arthur Vandenberg when he declared that partisanship must stop at the water's edge. My friends, with GATT, we've reached that water's edge. GATT isn't about Republicans or Democrats. GATT isn't about the White House and Congress. GATT isn't about who's in and who's out, according to the latest conventional wisdom. GATT is about America's position in the world. GATT is about America's future. 3 weeks ago tomorrow, the American people shared their own ideas about our nation's future. And they voted overwhelmingly for straight talk and against business as usual. So to those in the Congress of either party who understand the importance of passing GATT, I would simply say, stand up and be counted. Let your voice be heard. To those on either side of the aisle who seek to stop the agreement, I would say, remember what the voters said on November the 8th. Get on with the nation's business. And to all of them, I would say, pass GATT. Pass GATT now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Baker and Director Miller. Now it is my honor and privilege to present the person who built on the work of President Reagan and President Bush to bring these negotiations to a close. I know firsthand, and I look out at this gathering and see men and women who have served these former presidents who also know firsthand the burdens that the person in the Oval Office carries and the difficult choices that that person has to make. If it were not for President Clinton calling, arm-twisting, persuading world leaders that we needed a GATT agreement, we wouldn't be here today. Even though it was extremely unpopular in certain quarters, even though any day of the week you could pick up newspaper columns that described the approach as politically unwise, this president battled to pass NAFTA, to complete GATT, to bring APEC leaders to Seattle. This year he led the world at APEC and will bring together 34 leaders from the Americas to Miami. Throughout, he has worked tirelessly to keep trade bipartisan. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Jim Miller and Jim Baker, thank you for your moving and compelling remarks. Mr. Speaker, Leader Michael, members of the Congress, members of the Cabinet, and to all of you who have come here from previous administrations and from different walks of life, proving that this GATT agreement not only tears down trade barriers, it also bulldozes differences of party, philosophy, and ideology. I thank you all for being here. We have certainly demonstrated today that there is no partisan pride of ownership in the GATT agreement. It is not a Republican agreement or a Democratic one. It is an American agreement designed to benefit all the American people in every region of our country from every walk of life. Jim Baker spoke so eloquently about how this represents yet another historic choice for the United States in the 20th century. When we have walked away from our leadership and engagement responsibilities, as we did after the First World War, the world has paid a terrible price. When we have attempted to lead, as we did after the Second World War, it has not only helped the world, it has helped the people of the United States. We saw the greatest expansion of the middle class in our country and prosperity for working families in our country in the years after we tried to put together a system that would preserve peace and security and promote prosperity after World War II. We have done as much as we could here at home to try to deal with the difficult and daunting economic challenges we face, to bring the deficit down, to shrink the size of the government, to simultaneously increase our investment in education and technology and defense conversion. But we know that without the capacity to expand trade and to generate more economic opportunities, we will, first of all, not be able to fulfill our global responsibilities, and secondly, not be able to fulfill our responsibilities to the American people. I'd like to address a third argument, if I might, just from my heart. It's been raised against this agreement and raised against NAFTA. Jim Miller adequately disposed of the arguments that this is a budget buster and that this somehow impinges on our sovereignty. That isn't true. And he did a very compelling job of that. But let me say there is another big argument against this trade agreement that no one has advanced today, but that is underlying all of this. And I saw it in an article the other day written by a columnist generally sympathetic to me. He said, there he goes again with one of his crazy, self-defeating economic ideas, pushing this GATT agreement, which is one more prescription for the demise of the lower wage working people in America, which is the reason the Democratic Party's in the trouble it's in today, doing things like this that just kill working people. That is a wrong argument. But that is really the undercurrent against this GATT. The idea is that since we live in a global economy and there are people other places who can work for wages we can't live on, if we open our markets to them, they will displace our workers and they will aggravate the most troubling trend in modern American life, which is that the wages of non-college educated male workers in the United States have declined by 12% after you take account of inflation in the last 10 years. Now that has great superficial appeal. Why is it wrong? It's wrong because, number one, if we don't do anything, we'll have some displacement from foreign competition. But if we move and lead, we will open other markets to our products. And our nation has gone through a wrenching period over the last several years of improving its productivity, its ability to compete. We can now sell and compete anywhere. When we did NAFTA, they made the same argument. What's happened? 100,000 new jobs this year. What's happened? A 500% increase in exports of American automobiles to Mexico. What's the biggest complaint in Detroit now? The auto workers have too much overtime they have to do. If you think about where we were 10 years ago, that's what at home we call a high-class problem. Now, that is the problem we face in America. And the resentments of people who keep working harder and falling further behind and feel like they've played by the rules and they've gotten the shaft, they will play themselves out, these resentments, in election after election after election in different and unpredictable ways, just like they did in 1992 and 1994. But our responsibility is to do what is right for those people over the long run. That is our responsibility. And the only way to do that is to open other markets to American products and services, even as we open our markets to them. Yes, we have to improve the level of lifetime training and education for the American workforce. Yes, we have to deal with some of the serious particular problems of the American economy. But in the end, the private sector in this country and the working people of this country will do their jobs if they have half a shot at the high growth areas of the world. And what are the highest growth areas of the world? Not the wealthy advanced economies, but Latin America, Asia, and other places. GATT, along with NAFTA, and what we're trying to do with the Asian Pacific countries, and what we're going to try to do at the Summit of the Americas, this keeps America leading the world in ways that permits us to do both things we have to do at the end of the Cold War. To continue to be engaged, to continue to lead, to work toward a more peaceful and secure and prosperous world, and at the same time, to deal with the terrible nagging difficulties that so many millions of American families face today. There is no other way to deal with this. There is no easy way out. There is no slogan that makes the problem go away. This will help to solve the underlying anxiety that millions and millions of Americans face, and I might add millions of Europeans and millions of Japanese and others in advanced economies all around the world, and at the same time make the world a better place and the future more secure for our children. And we have to do it now. We can't wait till next year. We don't want to litter it up like a Christmas tree and run the risk of losing it. Every time I talk to a world leader in the last 6 months, they have asked me the same thing. When is the United States going to act on GATT? The rest of the world is looking at us. So we have a golden opportunity here to add $1,700 in income to the average family's income in this country over the next few years, to create hundreds of thousands of high-wage jobs, to have the biggest global tax cut in history, and to fulfill our two responsibilities: our responsibility to lead and remain engaged in the world, and our responsibility to try to help the people here at home to get ahead. We need to get on with it and do it now. Thank you very much.